Hey everybody, welcome to episode 54 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. On this episode, we talk about race fuel, exporting cars, and catalyst efficiency faults.
Busted Knuckles via VW Vortex says, "What up guys? I've got a 2011 GTI 6-speed. I'm Uni Stage 2 with Uni intake and 3-inch turboback Eurojet. I'm having an issue not building boost with the MAF plugged in, only 14 psi. I'm not getting any check engine light while plugged up. When I unplug the MAF, I get 19 to 20 psi and it runs great. I originally had a twin intake, so I thought the MAF placement was the issue, so I replaced it with the Uni intake. Still low boost. Bought an OEM MAF sensor and that didn't solve it either. I'm out of ideas and I need Vortex's help."
Okay, so the issue you're describing, you're having issues around building boost, and when you unplug the mass airflow sensor, you now build boost, which led you to believe that you had a bad mass airflow sensor. This is a common misconception that I've seen historically around this stuff. Basically what happens when you unplug the mass airflow sensor, your ECM then substitutes values for all the signals with known good values. So when you do that, you're not just taking the mass airflow sensor out of the system, you're actually taking a lot of the sensors out of consideration from the ECM, because it has to substitute known good values, because if it doesn't have a value for this one, it can't really necessarily trust the value of this one. So you have something else going on that's causing an issue. Clearly, you don't have a boost leak or anything of that nature, because once you unplug your mass airflow sensor and substitute known good values, or substitute any value for the mass airflow sensor, it's then creating boost under that scenario. So you have something in the system that's creating an issue. You will have to track down what that is. Now, you will have to, if you don't have the skill set to diagnose this, I would suggest probably having somebody help you diagnose it, which would be probably a local shop or something of that nature. You're going to have to do logging of demand versus actual on multiple sensors. The map sensor and boost pressure sensors would be one to look at. It could possibly be even maybe N75 valve related. Where it's not be able to control the wastegate properly, and somehow pulling the system into open loop then somehow creates a scenario where the N75 valve operates properly. I don't really know. Those are just a few things I'm spitballing. I would say you're definitely going to have to dig further in this to kind of pinpoint specifically what you're looking at.
2016 VW Turbo via VW Vortex says, "There's a place close to my local drag strip that sells 110 octane race fuel. Is it safe to run in the Stage 2 Tune Mark 7R? I have the high output, high torque 93 octane software. Planning to do some drag racing this weekend, and at 1050 a gallon I want to be sure it's okay to use."
Okay, so this question was actually asked on Vortex, and I actually grabbed it because I thought that this might be some interesting topics. This particular thread actually had a lot of pretty solid answers, which kind of are going to reflect some of the things I'm going to say here, but I wanted to touch on a couple things. First of all, 110 race gas. Most of 110 race gas is leaded, and so you will not want to run leaded gas in your car. Leaded gas will almost certainly destroy your catalytic converter and potentially destroy your oxygen sensors as well. The oxygen sensors is less immediate. The cat would be pretty much immediate. So if you ran any leaded fuel into a cat, it's going to just destroy it completely. If you have a catless downpipe in your car, it's an option to obviously run something like that. Long term, you're probably going to destroy your oxygen sensors, so you should be prepared for replacing them to the tune of, 150-ish each. Obviously that would be sometime after a while that you would have to just assume that's almost a maintenance item if you're going to run leaded fuel on the vehicle. The other component to this that I want to touch on is this. Running race fuel. So let's say you don't run 110, but you want to run 104, which is a common race fuel that you can find that is unleaded. If you were running 104 in your vehicle on just a factory stage 2 car, My thoughts are you're not going to see a ton of benefits performance-wise because the tuning of the vehicle is not optimized for that type of fuel. One of the benefits of running into higher octane fuels is that you can mess with a lot of fuel settings, timing advance, and boost things that give you the ability to tune the car differently to make more power because you don't have to worry as much about detonation, which is the main benefit of higher octanes. So while you would probably say, someone could argue, and I know some people mentioned in this thread that they saw benefits from going to a higher octane fuel. That's probably true a little bit because it would allow, whatever the tune you have, it would allow max timing advance for that. But keep in mind, it's not tuned for that, so you're only going to have a ceiling that's so high. The one thing I will say is, if you have that, if you have a tune and it's retarding timing because of potential worry about detonation and things like that, because a lot of these systems are really smart and they'll adjust on the fly. So if your vehicle was retarding timing, this would allow it to advance timing and you could see performance gains under those circumstances. They're not going to be as significant as if you were to have a tune specifically for that, but there may be some there. I'd be curious to see, actually, for me personally, I'd love to see dynos comparisons to see if there's actual real world results from running, let's say 93 versus 104 on just a factory tuned car.
Yellow C4S via VW Vortex says, I have a Mark 6 GTI and I just replaced both O2 sensors, intake manifold, did carbon cleaning, replaced valve seals, and replaced a high pressure fuel pump, and now I'm getting a P0420 code. Any ideas? I'm also stage 2, O2 sensors and high pressure fuel pump installed at a local APR dealer, intake, carbon cleaning, and valve seals done at a VW dealer.
Anthony, yes, the Mark 6 Jetta 1.8T does have a timing chain instead of a timing belt. If you saw that in the manual, it's either a generic statement based on all the models, because there would be some of the engines that came in Mark 6 Jettas that would have belts, like I believe the TDI and the 2-liter gas engine non-turbo version would have belts. So if it's generic, it might just say belts as a general rule about timing belts and not be engine specific, and you just happen to think because it's in your car it applies to yours. Sometimes that stuff is generic to go across all models and they don't have ones that are specific. If it is for 1.8T, obviously that's a typo of some kind and that's a mistake because your car does have a timing chain. In regards to oil change, so change your own oil obviously is a cost-effective way, especially for people who like to kind of do their own work. I'll put a link to the 1.8T oil change kits we have here where you can check those out. But we did a DIY on a Mark 7 GTI, which is a 2-liter turbo. A little bit different because the drain plugs would be different on a Mark 7, but some of the oil change wise, as far as removing and installing the oil filter, that type of stuff, would be similar on that car. I'll put a link to that video here where you can check out the DIY on the Mark 7 GTI, which would be similar. So it can give you kind of a feel for it if you're not super comfortable with getting into that right away. About carbon buildup, if you're not super familiar with changing oil and stuff like that and don't feel real comfortable with that, I would definitely not recommend trying to do your own carbon buildup. You will have to remove the intake manifold. It's probably easier on the 1.8T than it has been on some of the previous models, but the intake manifold has to actually be removed, and you have to actually physically clean the valves, and you have to continue to turn over the engine, closing the valves of the cylinder you're cleaning so you don't have carbon fall in there. That is something that you wouldn't have to do for many miles, probably 50, 60,000 miles. So I wouldn't worry too much about that yet. It's something to look at, kind of down the road, unless you're, if you're cranking through miles, then maybe something to consider.
Patrick via shopdap.com says, I have a 2015 VW GTI, which I purchased in the US. In late 2015, I moved to France and brought the car with me. Since coming to France, I've been struggling to have my VW conform with the French regulations. I have front fog lights, but the French also require a rear fog light, which has been successfully installed. The main problem that I now have is that it is illegal to have red turn signals in France. Turn signals have to be orange. A VW dealer was not able to complete this conversion after keeping the car for over a month. Apparently, none of the coding provided by VW has worked for the new European light assemblies which has been installed. The most that was accomplished was that the turn signals will work once displaying the orange color and then will revert back to the red color.
So for anybody who's not familiar with what Patrick's referring to, we've had a couple of customers who contacted us about a similar scenario. They're exporting a car. Now, most people who have done so have actually been in the process of exporting and they were digging into it. Sounds like you're in the middle of trying to export, or you've already exported your car and you're having trouble actually executing, making it meet the standards. So for anybody who's not familiar, in Europe, the standard of lights in the rear are taillights that have rear fog lights. That is mandatory to meet most, as far as I'm aware, most countries in Europe. Also, apparently, and I'm not familiar with this particular one, apparently amber rear turn signals are also a requirement. So there are also some other standards like crash specs, but the US has more stringent crash standards as far as the bumpers. US have 15-mile-an-hour bumpers, and I think most places in Europe, the requirement is 10-mile-an-hour bumpers. So, but going back to the taillights, I'm not familiar with that being a component, but in Europe, behind us we have the LED taillights that are these are all the non-US versions of the Mark 7 LED taillights. And then there's also a halogen version that has a clear strip on the bottom that would be used for a turn signal. From what I gather from Patrick, it sounds like that's the lights that they've tried to retrofit to his vehicle. Obviously, whenever you're swapping from one taillight to another, there's a lot of coding that is involved. And when we developed the harness for these taillights, that was something that obviously I developed a harness. There was a lot of coding information that was out there under different scenarios. And basically what I did is I took all that information and created a harness that executed that in a plug-and-play fashion. So while I was doing that, obviously we've made that as easy as possible to convert a US spec car to have these taillights. It is one of the solutions out there that is the easiest option to accomplish this goal. So the alternatives before that were actually running wires from the body control module, which is underneath the dashboard of the vehicle. You have to run them down the side of the car through the rocker panels and then to each individual tail light themselves, and then unpin a bunch of stuff. And obviously that was a much more complicated process than most people really weren't looking to tackle because of how challenging that was. So for you, Patrick, it sounds like the dealer is trying to get VW to give them the details on how to do that, and they're having a problem. Part of the reason why that is because this isn't really something that they support generally or something that is intended. And a lot of people want to export cars, especially because of the cost of vehicles there, because obviously, if you were to buy, let's say, a Mark 7 GTI in Europe, it's like, I don't know, 40,000 euro, which is, significantly more. It's a $40,000 or $50,000 car by the time you're all said and done. So because of that, obviously, a lot of people want to bring their car from here to there instead of having to buy a new car there, which is a big incentive if you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So for your particular scenario, Patrick, I don't really like to recommend this, but I think your best choice is always going to be to buy the set of lights and the harnesses that we offer, and then you'll have coding instructions with all the information you need, including, and you can add on the rear fog wire. I'll put a link to all of our tail lights. The article that we have that kind of explains all the LED taillight stuff and also has links to all the taillights at the bottom of it here, where you can check that out. So what you're going to want is a set of LED taillights, the harness, adapter harness, and then a rear fog wire. And then those three things, those components, will get you in to meet the spec required. So the cheapest way to do that would actually be this set right here, which is the OEM Chinese market lights are the least expensive option to accomplish this. They are still factory lights over in China, and they're going to be the cheapest one that you can find to accomplish this. The other two up here are going to be more expensive options for retrofitting the LED taillights on your Mark 7. So I'll put a link to that particular set here with the harness where you can check that out, and hopefully this helps you resolve your issue.
Yellow C4S via VW Vortex says, I have a Mark 6 GTI and I just replaced both O2 sensors, intake manifold, did carbon cleaning, replaced valve seals, and replaced the high pressure fuel pump. And now I'm getting a P0420 code. Any ideas? I'm also stage 2, O2 sensors and high pressure fuel pump installed at a local APR dealer. Intake, carbon cleaning, and valve seals done at a VW dealer.
Okay, so the issue you're having is actually a fault code for catalyst efficiency below threshold. Most likely to me, it's one of a few things. You either have a bad catalytic converter or potentially the rear oxygen sensor that you just installed is not reading properly. Maybe it's the incorrect one for the car. Seems not super likely, but possible. Or, you know, I don't know if maybe if the tune's not on there anymore, the stage 2 tune will often widen the parameters for the reading for the catalyst efficiency. So it's probably one of those three. I would lean towards the fact that cat might be bad, but I don't know. It doesn't say what kind of downpipe you have in the vehicle. But for sure, you want to look at the cat-related stuff, either rear oxygen sensor or catalytic converter, or basically that's really the only two it could be. So go down that road. Hopefully that solves your problem. But keep in mind, these are most likely not related to anything with intake cleaning or anything like that, because they're not going to create catalyst efficiency faults. Thank you for watching episode 54 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen Audi questions. If you have any questions or comments about the questions answered in this show, be sure to leave in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.